started anyway. And then they can just sort of catch up with us. Let me make sure that we are recording. Okay, so I like to begin with this image because everything sort of that is encapsulated in the questions for the PPR, the best case scenario, you can see in the student-centered learning, where students are collaborating with each other. Their knowledge, their experience, their beliefs are equal, if not as important or more important than what the teacher brings to the table. And so on the teacher-centered learning, we have the teacher as the center of the knowledge and experience. And although we can't take ourselves 100% away from the teacher-centered learning, we have to try as much as possible to bring in opportunities for the students to speak to each other, to speak to the teacher, to speak to other students in other classrooms, just to constantly be talking about their ideas concerning the academic content. And if you look at the teacher-centered learning, there is no, one moment, let me do draw. You'll see there's no discussion between students here. This is quiet here. And in this type of classroom, oral language proficiency is not being practiced. And it's simply not being practiced because there's no talking. And the teacher is the only one that's talking. The teacher has all the knowledge, all the experience, and they are transferring it to the students. And while that's not entirely wrong, and we do still use teacher-centered learning, teacher-directed learning, we want to exist in student-centered learning, where the students are the focus of the learning activities, of the engagement, of the process. In the, hold on one second. In student-centered learning, there is not one person who holds all the knowledge, the experience, and the beliefs that are worthy of knowing. They are shared. And if you look, the teacher is part of the learning experience in this image, within the circle of knowledge, experience, and beliefs. So in the second visual, the students have agency. They are a part of, an important part of the learning process. Teacher-centered learning still takes place. You cannot get away from it. Any new concepts that we teach in the classroom, they're going to be taught via teacher-centered instruction. If I cannot hear, oh my goodness. Can you guys hear me, guys? Can you let me know if you guys can hear me? Because Mr. Garza said he couldn't hear me.
I could hear you.
Excellent. Excellent. So with Texas education, with the PPR, the goal is to give the students, for you, your goal is to design instruction that is appropriate for all students, no matter what age group, K through 12, no matter what special population they are, based on the relevant content, with assessments that are continuous and consistent. And what that means is that you are planning activities that will promote the students' knowledge, and they come to your classroom already with knowledge. We're not giving them knowledge into an empty glass. They come with things, and the things that they come with, their knowledge, their experience, their beliefs, those are resources that are far too often not tapped in the classroom. So the second visual, the student-centered learning, is the goal. After we've taught the concepts, introduced any new concepts via direct teacher-centered learning, taught the vocabulary via teacher-centered learning, we break off into activities that are more student-centered. Those student-centered activities, the students are more active. They are active agents in their learning. Do we have any questions for this part? Okay, everyone should have access to this PPR Google Drive. If you don't have access to it, I'm gonna put a link to this Google file in the chat. Please open up the link and save it for your use later. Oh, hold on, it's only sending it to Garza, everyone in the meeting. Most of you should have it, but if you don't have it, please certainly open up the link in the chat box and save it for your use later. So every exam, every content exam, including the PPR, starts off with this standards document. This is the document that they send to the test makers. And so it behooves you to be familiar with the concepts and the tasks and skills that you should be able to do before you walk into the classroom. Typically, standards 1 and standards 3 give students the most difficulties. And that is because standard 1 is your designing of the instruction and assessments that are appropriate for all students K through 12, regardless of their special population, relevant to the content. And then standard 3 is your implementation of it. How are you implementing it in the classroom? What activities? What instructional strategies are you using? What communication techniques are you using? How is your feedback? Is it timely? Is it effective? So those standards give students, teacher interns, the most difficulty. And so it behooves us to really take a close look. And if you haven't already done so, I highly suggest that you do learn, especially standard 1, because standard 1 is the most tested standard in the exam. It appears in domain 1 and then again in domain 3, which make up 67% of your exam. So if I were someone, a vetting person, and I certainly would make sure that standard 1 was, understood, that you understand everything, the nuances of what is knowledge-based and what needs to be applied. So the way that you read this document is on the left-hand side, you have the teacher knowledge skills. These are standards over concepts that you must know in your brain. On the right-hand side, you have the application. This is the implementation, the skills that you must have before you come into the classroom. So on the left-hand side, in this beginning part of standard 1, you have, and it shows you nicely in this bold, if you know how to read it, the different subsections. This is about students. This is about you knowing your students, because we cannot teach effectively if you don't know your students, what their interests are, what their weaknesses, what their strengths are, where they are developmentally, if they are, on track developmentally, are they delayed, are they ahead, where are they, knowing your students. And so 1.1K refers to the intellectual, social, physical, emotional development characteristics of students in different age groups. And you don't have to memorize the theoretical sort of frameworks, Piaget, Kohlberg, Erickson, but you do need to know how those would affect your instruction. We plan differently based on age group. Early child students, their brains are developed less than our middle child. So too are high school students. And so based on where they are developmentally, age group, affects the way they learn. It affects what types of instructional strategies are more or will resonate more with that type of learner based on where they are cognitively, where they are socially, physically, emotionally, development wise. And what's important for the PPR exam is that in the scenarios, they give you hints. It is a critical reading exam above all. And so they will give you an age group or a grade level. And if they do, that information should be used to assess how would I change slash alter this instruction, this activity, this assessment to better suit the needs of the students that were described in the scenario. So when you're taking the PPR exam, it is so important that you are mindful of the particular words that are used in the scenarios and in the questions, understanding exactly what the question is asking. If you can say to yourself, what is the goal of the teacher, and identify, oh, the goal of the teacher is to plan instruction that motivates students to want to learn. And you'll see it's this. Every answer on the exam is going to come from this right-hand side of this document. This document here, every correct answer on the exam will come from the right-hand side of the document. It will be an educator applying their knowledge in the classroom. So because standard 1 is such a highly tested area, it can appear in 67% of it because it makes up all of domain 1. All of domain 1 is standard 1, and it makes up 33%. And then domain 3 makes up 34%, and it has standard 1, standard 3, and technology application standards 1 through 7. So that domain has kind of a lot, but standard 1 is in there. Standard 1 is the most important. It's integral to our job. Our job is teaching, and standard 1 is about you designing the plan for your teaching based on the particular people you have in your classroom at that time. For the purposes of the exam, it's going to be based on who they delineated in the scenario. If they say a 7th grade class with ELL students, then those should be 2 red flags, 2 neon signs, 7th grade and ELL. That means I know that they're middle age, which is a different type of learner. They're going through different things, and they're acquiring a second language. Based on that information in the scenario, I need to make sure that my answer reflects that, reflects support for someone in the 7th grade and reflects support for someone who's acquiring a second language. And so it's half of the battle for the PPR exam is making sure that you're mindful while you're reading the scenarios to look for keywords and phrases that you need to pay special attention to. That vernacular, that language of pedagogy, make sure that you pay attention to it. What are they saying with that word? If you have to repeat what they say in layman's terms, do that so that you can more readily identify the correct answer. But if we're talking about a study plan for the PPR, having a strong understanding of standard 1 is so important to passing the exam. 67% of the exam, it can come up in. So, and 33% of it for sure is all about standard 1. So you have this section about students, and then you have a section about content and pedagogy. You have a section about instructional goals and objectives. A section about resources, a section about designing coherent instruction, and assessing of student learning. Those are all of the subsections of standard 1. And so in a scenario and a question to them, you might be able to identify the goal of the teachers to choose resources that would better enable them to, access the learning. Or you are, developing instructional goals that are able to be assessed, which is a very important sort of concept as far as instruction and assessment. A lot of people think, oh, we just assess so that we can give people a hierarchy of like mastery, right? Oh, you got an A, you got a B, you got a C, so on and so forth. That's not what we assess for. We assess to check for understanding and to make sure that our instruction is, hold on one second, guys. I'll be right back. All right, guys. So we assess to check for understanding, to see if our students mastered their learning objectives that we set forth. And if not, and based on the number, if not, like if we have a class of 30 and 15 of them, after I give an exit ticket saying for them to identify the diction words that showed the poem, the author's tone was, morose or something, and I get a lot of diction words that do not indicate morose, then I know I have to reteach my lesson on diction, because clearly half of my class is unable to identify diction, to identify tone in an author's work. So instruction and assessment is cyclical. Assessment is sort of like the GPS to where do we need to go? Can we move on, or do we need to circle back? Who needs more support, or is everybody copacetic and we can move on? So never should you have a learning objective that cannot be assessed, that cannot be measured. So it's like a bad learning objective if you can't assess it. Why would we even do it if we can't measure if you're doing it well or not? So all of our learning objectives need to be able to, like at the very least, the litmus test for if it's a learning objective is, can it be assessed? Can you assess mastery of this skill? And it, for the purposes of your exam and for teaching, all objectives need to be able to be mastered. We don't just teach things just to teach them. We're always checking for understanding. And so developing instructional goals and objectives that are able to be assessed. 1.12s is develop instructional goals and objectives that are clear, relevant, and meaningful, and age appropriate. So you would, if you were a fourth grade English teacher, you were a teacher and you're teaching your English class, have very different activities than you would with a class of juniors. Even if you were teaching the same text, going over the same text, which you can do, you can teach a text and do activities that are more challenging, more rigorous with the same text. We do it all the time in English. Seventh graders will read a story, and then again, they'll read it again when they're juniors or seniors. Like, I read this before. Doing new things, going deeper into the analysis. So the point is that with any text, however simple it is, the learning objectives can get pretty complex. And you have to make sure that you are designing and creating, composing learning objectives that are appropriate for your particular students, where they are academically, cognitively, where they are maturity-wise. You know your students and you know what they, what's appropriate for them and what's not. And so on an exam, they might ask you, Miss Salceda wants to, check the appropriateness of her learning objectives for her 7th grade ELAR class. And if you look through the objectives and they're too simple or they're too complex, you'll know it's not appropriate for a 7th grade ELAR class. So it's not about the content on the PPR. It's about the pedagogical strategy. It's about you choosing instruction strategies, activities that are appropriate for the particular students mentioned in the scenario in the question, with the work with the content area that they're working with. And the hardest part of the exam is making sure that you are mindful and pay close attention to the words that they use in the questions and in the scenarios, because they spend a lot of money making it tricky, which is why literally everyone who is taking the exam says that you'll get down to 2 answer choices and you won't be able to choose between them because they both seem correct. And the reason they both seem correct is because those tricky jerks gave you more than one appropriate response, something that you could and would do in your classroom. But one of those answer responses is better than the others based on the words that they gave you, based on the particular students, based on the particular population, whether it's special ed, ELL, socially disadvantaged, socioeconomic disadvantage, whatever they said, one answer choice is more appropriate, the most appropriate. That means that other ones are appropriate, but the most appropriate is the one that matches with the keywords and phrases, that aligns to support the keywords and phrases that you identified in your scenario. And we're going to go through some practice questions together to take a look at the strategies, and know that they do spend a lot of money composing these exams to be tricky, and that on purpose they have put answer choices that are appropriate and you would totally do them. I'm going to show you an example of it on our first practice question. For anyone who has just entered, I put in the chat box the link to this Google Drive that you see on the screen, that you should see on the screen. And so we were just taking a look at the PPR EC through 12 standards, which is the document that the state sends to the test maker. So the test maker makes the test from that document. So it behooves you to take a look at it and be familiar with it. This quick sheet that's here is really great. I just want to show you really quickly. I'm not going to go too far into it. Is a really good quick study in the beginning over standard 1. You have Piaget, you have physical development, maturation, you have the different characteristics and the milestones, what is developmentally appropriate for different age groups. Very important for you to know, because during the exam, in the scenarios, if they mention an age group or a grade level, if they mention a special population like ELL or special ed, socioeconomic disadvantage, and divorced parents, a special population, and they want you to take that neon sign, that red flag, into consideration when you're choosing your answer. Make sure that your answer is appropriate for those keywords and phrases. So this is a really good study guide. It's very, very old. It's no longer in print, which is why I only have this horrific copyright infringement copy, which is no longer copyright infringement because it's not even for sale anymore. But the state had this document taken out of print because it was so useful to students, because it was such a useful study tool. They made Dynanotes, TEA made Dynanotes stop printing it. So it's no longer in print. You guys now have it. Please use it. I know that it's old. It's like hasn't been updated since like, I don't know, 2012 or 11. I think that's when I got it. So the second side of it is not as useful. We don't use PDAS anymore as our appraisal system. But for the most part, everything is useful for you to know. As far as communication is concerned, wait time is so important. Science said, research says that the time that the student is allowed before the teacher asks another student for a response, the wait time, if you extend that, you will get better, more meaty and meaningful responses to your questions if you extend that wait time. And when I first started teaching in 2003, that was one of the things that I learned from my mentor teacher that came in to observe me. She said, you're doing really great, except during your discussions, you've got to extend your wait time. And I went through an EPP program. My degree was in English, so I didn't know. And I said, what's the wait time? Like, what are you talking about right now? And the way she explained it to me, it was so true. She said, when you were going through, oh, Raul, you know, what did the author mean when he said this? Or like the character, blah, blah, blah. If Raul waited 5, 6, 7 seconds in silence, I moved on to Sarai. Sarai waited for 5, 6, and there was like that empty silence. I moved on to Rosa until somebody gave me the right answer. That is not assessing the students for understanding. That is looking for somebody who has the right answer. I want to assess for understanding. And so extending that wait time allows students, especially our ELO learners, to gather their thoughts on what you just said, translate if they need to, think about their response, translate back, and then respond to you. So with native English speakers and with our ELO learners, extending wait time always, science says, research says, gives you better answers. So please take a look at this document when you have a chance and certainly study it. Before we move to the questions, I would like to show you another tool, the ELPS instructional tool. This was created by TEA and it is amazing. It is so useful for teaching you like what ELLs need to in order to be supported in a classroom. And it breaks it down for you in graphics, you know, what particular real classroom, like what can you do to support the students that are beginners in speaking, that are beginners in listening, that are beginners in reading, like what classroom activities, what supports, what should you expect back if it works. And so this document is really incredible. Oh, I'm sorry, I just entered. Can you share the folder again? Okay, yes, I will re-share it for you. So I'm gonna go back to, do we have any questions so far? Wait, hold on, I need to go here first. Okay, India, can you click on the link and just let me know that you're able to get it, that you were able to get in?
Yes, I got it. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, so there are several documents here for you, and they're all incredibly useful. Now, you don't have to memorize them, but I certainly implore you to read through them, especially the one about ELLs, especially the cheat sheet. Print it out, carry it with you, look it over if you need to, you know, not if you need to, like if you have time, just to commit those ideas to memory. The quick sheet is very useful, especially with standard 1. There's a lot of standard 1 the knowledge part in it, the part that you have to apply later, on that quick sheet. So please, if you have a chance, take a look at it. So this is what I was talking about. Domain 1, which is designing instruction and assessment to promote student learning, which is 34%, is only standard 1 that we looked at. Remember, standard 1 is designing instruction and assessment for all students. That's appropriate for all students. That's 34%. And then you have domain 3, which is after you designed it, after you compose this amazing lesson and activities, domain 3 is you implementing it, you doing it. What is your responsive instruction? What is your effective implementation of your plan of action and your assessment? So it's like the follow through of domain 1. And so you still have standard 1, then you have the addition of standard 3 and technology applications 1 through 7. I've also included those in the folder. Now, I don't think that you have to like study those with, any type of urgency technology applications, but I do think that you should look through those standards and see what should all Texas teachers be able to do. Most of it is really easy, like standards 1 through 7 are sort of like the basics of technology, that you understand what a modem is and like a display and what is input and output and introverse, and just make sure we're internet and intranet. So make sure that you are familiar with the words that are used on the technology applications. If there's anything that is foreign to you, please make sure that you look it up. There's no shame in not knowing something. There's only shame in pretending you know it and moving on like you do. So as a strategy for the PPR, 67% comes from standards 1 and 3, and then technology applications sort of like thrown into domain 3. But understanding your design of instruction and assessment and your implementation of effective responsive instruction and assessment is what's most important for this exam. Those are going to be the questions that give you the most difficulty. I have tutored hundreds, possibly now thousands of teachers that have taken the PPR, and anytime someone has been unsuccessful and come to me, sent me their scores, it's always domains 1 and 3 that are an issue. Has anyone in this class taken the exam? And if so, were domains 1 and 3 your weakest points?
For mine was.
Thank you, Mr. Cardona. So for you, it was, which was your lowest, domain 1 or domain 3?
I believe it was domain 3.
Okay. Yeah. And so remember, domain 3 has in it standards 1, standard 3, and standards 1 through 7 of technology applications. So that domain has more for you to cover. Domain 1 is only standard 1. It is only about what you need to know and do in order to design effective instruction and assessment in order to promote student learning. And domain 3 adds that same standard with the addition of how are you implementing it, how are you doing it now that you've planned it, and also what technology are you using as well. So we're going to take a look at, here the technology standards. And so they have just the overarching ones. These are the standards that use the like standard overview, and then each standard has like a breakdown of particular tasks and knowledge standards and skills that the teacher must have. Competency 1 is all about the student and the human development process, like understanding how humans develop, applying that knowledge when you're planning instruction and assessment, and doing it in a way that will motivate the students based on where they are developmentally. Like students are motivated differently at each age level. They're engaged differently. They even learn differently. Early children, EC, kinder, first grade, second grade, third grade, they are concrete learners. Can someone tell me what a concrete learner is? What does it mean to be a concrete learner? Chrissy.
Hi. Concrete is like when it's hands-on rather than talking about pictures or images in your head. Concrete is like I need to actually touch blocks or I need to
Absolutely.
go out
So it's
in
very
my-
hands-on, it's experimental, I'm seeing it, it's like empirical data that I'm seeing, living, touching, experiencing, right? It's concrete in front of me. Early children learn that way. Their brains are not developed like anatomically to think abstractly, and they have less neurological pathways, they're less experiences, less knowledge for them to create ideas abstractly. Our older kids in high school, you can describe something to them and they can take your description and what their prior knowledge and abstract something similar to what you're talking about. Their brains are developmentally able to do that and equipped with the knowledge to do that. Our early children are not. And so when we're planning, it's important to understand what type of student, what age level they are, how their brains work, and how best to get them to understand the concepts that we're teaching them. So domain 1 centers around that. Okay, so I'm going to show you this first one. Okay, Mr. Cardenas, can you read for me number 1?
Which of the following strategies is most appropriate for assisting English language learners, ELLs, at the beginning level of proficiency with reading context-specific material?
Okay, before we go on to the answer choices, everyone here, guys, your strategies are, after you've read the scenario in question, I want for you to identify keywords and phrases that are important that you think you should take into consideration before you make your final answer choice. So shout them out for me, guys. Unmute yourself and tell me what I should highlight. What is important in this question stem that I need to take into consideration?
English language learners, beginning level of proficiency.
Thank you. Beginning level. With what?
Reading content specific.
And then we have here content specific. That's important. They didn't say with reading material. They said reading content specific material. Remember, guys, the words that they use in the questions and the scenarios are purposeful, carefully crafted. So they have told you that you are looking for the most appropriate for helping. It says assisting, but I like to put in my own words the question. So what's the best way to help ELLs at the beginning level of proficiency with reading? And it's academic content. It's content specific. So that's different. Now let's take a look at the answer choices. When you read the answer choices on the exam, I don't want for you to eliminate one before you've read all of them and measured all of them, weighted all of them. Because one of the things that Pearson likes to do, the test makers like to do, is they like to put an answer choice that most people will go to. That's wrong, right? That most people that didn't read carefully will see, oh, blah, 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 and I'll go to this one instead. And so make sure that you don't eliminate any of them until you can bet yourself $5, oh, this isn't the answer because of this. This isn't the answer because of this, to myself, justifying it to myself, bet myself $5, this isn't the answer. And make sure that the answer choice that you do end up with supports or addresses the keywords and phrases that you identified as important for the scenario. So right now we have beginning level proficiency with reading academic specific material, content specific material. And we want to know what is the best way to assist our ELLs. Okay, Mr. Cardenas, can you read for us all of the answer choices? And then after you've read all of them, let me know which one you can eliminate and why, which one you can bet yourself $5 it's not the right answer and I'll eliminate it.
So number A, providing instruction on text-based academic vocabulary prior to reading. B, requiring students to develop outlines of the text in English while reading. C, having students read content material out loud in groups with other ELLs. Or D, provide students with parallel text in English in their native language. I would say C, because reading out loud, it doesn't really go along with content specific material.
And why not? Why would you say not?
Because I think you would have to know some things about or some vocabulary in order to know specifically content specific material.
That's right. And what students are we working with?
ELLs,
And
beginning level.
beginners cannot read content specific material out loud in groups of ELLs. Beginners don't have the language. Predominantly their language is their first language. They have not yet acquired basic interpersonal communication skills, the BICS. They're requiring it now. And so putting them in a group to read content specific, which is harder than basic interpersonal skills. Like basic interpersonal skills is like, I went to the store to buy water and a soda, my mom is sick, I have a headache. That's basic interpersonal. Talking about like the processes of mitosis is different. So we would never help a student by putting them to read, like assigning them to read content specific material out loud with other ELLs, because a beginner is not going to be able to participate and they will learn very little from other ELLs. Okay, who else can eliminate an answer choice?
I can eliminate B because I mean you're trying to pull them away from their native language as well.
Right. So, and what about outlines of the text in English? Can beginners do outlines of a text in English while reading? Can a beginner develop an outline of the text that they are reading content specific material on?
No.
No, it's very difficult. Outlining is difficult for even native English speakers, right? It's like hard for native English speakers. So we would never task a beginner student to create an outline. So B and C for sure are not the answer. We can bet ourselves $5 that is not the answer. Okay, so now we have A and D. Now, I told you before that typically the state and the test writers will leave you with 2 appropriate responses left, right? And one is more appropriate than the other based on what they've said to you. So you've narrowed it down, guys, to 2. Which other one should we eliminate? And tell me why.
Wouldn't it be D? Because just looking parallel text in English in their native language won't really try to be focused on content specific material.
Yes, you're absolutely right, Mr. Cardenas. So like while providing them with parallel text does help and is a support that we use. I used it in my class. I worked at PSG North for 8 years and taught Romeo and Juliet a million years. And I had books that were on one side Spanish and the other side, Old English of Romeo and Juliet. And many times my ELLs would read that to follow along in class, read the English. But helping students acquire another language means that you're teaching it and you're giving it to them. And by providing a parallel text, they might be able to understand what we're reading, but they aren't directly acquiring the language. And so the best way to assist all of your students, but especially your ELLs, is to provide direct instruction of academic vocabulary, text-based academic vocabulary prior to reading. So let's say that I was going to read A Telltale Heart with my students, and there were words that the textbook identified as vocabulary for me to go over. And so I taught those like I should. However, I identified more words in the story that I knew would be difficult for my students and would impede, hinder, hurt their comprehension, their understanding. And so as a teacher, because my goal is their understanding of the reading, I make more work for myself. And I take a little bit of extra time to teach the extra 3 or 4 words that I know that textbook writer or maker didn't know. My students didn't know what language they had, what language they didn't have. And so in order to cover the holes of comprehension, that direct instruction of text-based academic vocabulary is so important. And that's always best practice. Every academic, if they say content-specific material, you better be defining that vocabulary for them. I don't care if they're ELLs, if they're native English speakers, define academic vocabulary prior to instruction before you use it. In that definition, you should include visuals, prior knowledge, examples that would resonate and connect the students' understanding with that new word. Do you see how they gave you 2 answers that you would use in the classroom? I used both of those, but if I am trying to improve on their ability to read and understand on their own, direct instruction of vocabulary is going to be more meaningful and effective than simply providing them with parallel text in their language and English. That will help them understand the lesson, but it will not help them acquire the language. And the goal always with ELLs is obviously understanding the content, but acquisition of the English language. Any questions on this example? Oops. Sorry, guys. Okay, guys, I'm so sorry, but I have to cut it a little bit short today. I'm only gonna be here like 15 minutes. We will meet again next Wednesday. We're not having a session tomorrow because I'm visiting teacher interns in Austin and Houston this week, and so it's kind of busy. But next week on Wednesday and Thursday, we will have sessions at 6:30, and we will continue to build on these ideas and do some more questions. Are there any questions, guys?
Will I be using the same link? I'm sorry. I didn't know. I think my professor just sent me this. Will I be using
No, not at all. Yes, use the same. It'll be the same link next week at 6:30, Wednesday and Thursday.
Okay, perfect.
Usually Wednesday and Thursday. We just don't have this Thursday because I'm just out of town right now. I'm actually out of town right now, but there's so many people testing that I had to make sure that I checked in with you guys this week. But next week it'll be like normal, Wednesday and Thursday. And so Wednesday we go into the pedagogy. I sort of like, tell you best practices. And then Thursday is when we do more of the questioning. So that we'll do next week. Please keep your Zoom links. Keep the link to the Google file for your use and studying later. And I will see you guys next week. Thank you for attending.
Mhm.
You guys have a beautiful rest of your week.